Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Are you ready for World War III? Because I think that's probably what's going to happen. At the best case scenario is what I was looking at this morning. We probably have to the middle or the end of March, which isn't that far away. We're talking like a month and a half or less. Because that's where it seems that some of these tanks are going to be delivered to Russia. And of course, you all should know about all the tanks that's being sent over, not to Russia, but to Ukraine. Well, a lot of them will be ended up in the Russian hands for certain. This is, it's just ridiculous. Have you noticed something, regardless of your position of who's the good guy and bad guy, or like me, none of them are the good guys. Have you noticed there's been virtually no attempts to stop this, to de-escalate this, to negotiate? I mean, we've heard a little bit here and there in the past, but very, very little, especially coming from the American side. And in the past, the Americans have always tried to be the ones to at least they say so, to get the war drums to stop beating. And here we are being the ones to really push this further. I was reading this morning out of a Greek news source that Zelensky is wanting 300 tanks on the first phase. The first round of tanks, he wants 300. And that's just the first phase, so there'll be many more phases after that. Yesterday, the Secretary of Defense, believe it was, stated that we're going to be involved in this a long time, and that Americans should prepare for getting used to sending all kinds of money and weapons over to Ukraine. Zelensky's already said that the next thing he's wanting is F-16s. Yeah, he wants to send some F-16s over. And then, of course, there's all the Leopard tanks that Germany and many other European countries are sending. It's interesting. I saw on the news this morning that the German tanks, I don't see anything on the Abrams tanks, but the German tanks aren't expected to be there till the end of March. So that's a little ways away, and that's expected. They got to train all these people, and that's some pretty fast training. I'm sure that the Abrams will be much of the same way, unless the plan is to put some mercenary ex-U.S. soldiers in charge of those tanks. They're going to have to train the Ukrainians, and that's going to take time too. And of course, the end of March, that puts them right in the time period of the ground thawing over there in Ukraine, which is just going to make a big, muddy mess for a bunch of 40 and 50 ton chunks of metal. Probably not too smart. Makes me wonder how much of this is just a show, well, we know what kind of show it is, but I don't use that kind of language on this channel. The odds of this escalating, continuing to escalate into some type of global conflict is becoming a very real possibility. It's becoming reality. Russia has said that the moment those German tanks reach Ukraine, it's kind of on. And in some ways, I don't blame them. The last time they had German tanks coming at them, it cost them 27 million Russians. And that's something that I'm sure many, if not most of the Russians remember all too well. And if they didn't live through it, they've certainly heard stories of it. That's a lot of their population, a lot. That's like, a sixth or a seventh of their population right now. If that had happened to America, we would certainly remember that and have that taste in our mouth still. And so it's really mobilizing Russians, apparently, to stand up against the other half of the world that seems to be against them right now. The ridiculousness of this is just that. It's ridiculous. The amount of tanks so far being sent over is really not that much. And although a lot of the tanks that the Russians have used so far are old Cold War era, they certainly have modern tanks that could be much more comparable to the Abrams. I see so many people comparing the old T-72 tanks to the Abrams. Well, that's like comparing, an old U.S. M60 tank. That's a Cold War era tank. And yes, they have a lot of them and they still use them. But they certainly have much more modern tanks, much bigger, much stronger tanks. And the big thing is they have a whole lot of them. They have more tanks than anyone in the world, and they're kind of experts at ground warfare tanks, especially in the wintertime. So it's possible that Russia could hold off until these tanks get there, at least hold off in the sense of really amping up their war tactics, waiting for those to come, or they could, take the time between now and the end of March and really soften up the Ukrainian soil. We'll have to wait and see for that. The bigger point that I'm trying to get to is that we should be really gearing up for World War III, and I know many of you already are. And I've been talking about this off and on quite a bit lately. Because whether or not this war will physically find itself to our shores or not, and then that's a possibility. We've got that Russian frigate that's getting close to the, U.S. East Coast with its hypersonic missiles. There's the Russian spy ship out there in Hawaii. There's been all kinds of reports of Chinese espionage and even Russian possible, especially down in South America. They're getting closer and closer and more involved in countries down there. So the possibility of us feeling this physically on our soil is real, but even if we don't, we will most certainly feel the repercussions of a global war. Like I said the other day, we are in very possibly the worst condition for being involved in such a major global war. And I think it's going to play havoc and very easily could push us over the edge of all the things that we're on the edge of right now. Basically it's collapse. And I was thinking about that last night, and then it dawned on me, I don't really even know what a lot of people understand when I say collapse. Because Hollywood kind of paints a collapse as something like a Book of Eli or Mad Max scenario where everything is just completely desolation. And that's not it at all. Many countries have collapsed over the last, 50 to 100 years. The Russians, they technically collapsed twice with the Communist Revolution and the collapse of communism. Of course, Venezuela in the last few years, the German Weimar Republic, several countries throughout South America and African countries have gone through collapses. Sierra Leone just went through a collapse this last year. Most of the Eastern Bloc countries in Europe, they collapsed in some form or fashion after the fall of communist Russia when it all broke apart there. Collapsing societies is a very real thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean everything's gone away or that the government no longer exists or that there is absolutely no food whatsoever. It just means that, all the systems that you've come to know and love and depend on really break down, and many of them just no longer exist anymore. And it can be very chaotic. It can be chaotic for a long period of time or a short period of time, but it can be very chaotic either way. And that's, I believe strongly, what we're going to see. We're going to see something like that. It may be one or two or some of the systems around us, and it may be all of them together. But this going into basically World War III with Russia and, of course, China, that's going to all be part of it eventually. It could very well push us into a collapse. Our economy is teetering constantly. Our monetary system, the U.S. dollar, not doing good. It's probably going to just pave the way for a digital currency even more. And then, of course, our supply chains have been greatly weakened through all of the, health crisis, lockdown, blah, blah, blah stuff. We have to get ready for this, folks. Become as self-sufficient as possible and start really working on our game plan because... even if a nuclear war on our shores isn't coming, and it certainly could, the collateral damage that we will feel here on our country, our soil, it could be very real and very serious. If you go back during World War II, when you had a very unified nation and a mentally stable nation, and a strong workforce, okay? So in my opinion, America was in way better condition at the start of World War II. And even then, it was a struggle on people at home. Resources were thin. People really had to cut back in a lot of ways. And a lot of the things they were used to just weren't available because the resources were going to the war effort. And that will most likely be the same way, but probably amplified because we don't have the workforce that we once did. We don't have an America that pulls together and that sees that together we're stronger, and that it's more important to look past our differences, to be together and to strengthen our nation, and it's just the patriotism just isn't there. And that and many other reasons, I think that this is going to be a pretty dark moment for America, and it may be our last, but certainly a dark one. And we have to get ready because it just seems like everyone's wanting to go to war. And of course, the military-industrial complex is all for that because they got to make some money. They're not making a lot of money if we're not going to war. And so another really big war that they can basically fund both sides, them and the big old banksters, is just going to be great for them. It's just another way that they can consume more of the world's wealth and transfer it over into, their pocketbooks. So we have to be serious about this. The possibility that you and I will feel this more directly than we think is real. We could be looking at a draft. Our numbers, our recruitment numbers are down. Our total troop numbers are down. No one really seems to want to go to war. Well, no one seems to at least want to serve in uniform. And so if a large war got spread around and fully engaged, they're going to need bodies, folks. Which means that they're probably going to start another draft. I can't see that Russia would back down at all at this anymore. I don't know Russia, but I could see that this would really unify Russia and solidify their efforts to take back parts of Ukraine and to defend themselves from NATO in the West. And at this point, coming to some agreement and some peace deal, I think, is pretty far-fetched. And the reality is they're probably going to throw everything at it. That's what I would. At this point, it's not about taking back former Russian soil. It's about protecting what they have already and defending Russia from the West. And that puts them in a very dangerous situation, us in a very dangerous situation, because as you all know, they're very nuclear capable. We should be thinking about this quite a bit, maybe not all the time, but certainly planning and learning of what we could do to get ourselves more self-sufficient. If these systems that we talk about are going to collapse, isn't it better to break away from them on your own terms than to be brought down with them when they collapse? That's why self-sufficiency is really a very important thing. Producing your own foods, creating your own systems within your communities, not being so connected and tethered to all of this, so that if it all comes crashing down, things may be tough, but you can survive without it. A lot of people just can't do that. They can't mentally do that. The idea of not being able to check their phone and have their $10 coffee at some frou-frou place just is, a mental breakdown for them. Don't be like that. Be tough and be ready, because some type of global war seems to be in the works, folks. It's all building. It's time to get your houses in order. It's time to prepare mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.